For 12 long years, my own son told me I wasn't family. But the night he suddenly appeared at my $8 million mansion, I didn't rush to hug him. I called security. What he revealed on that dark dirt road uncovered secrets from my past, danger lurking in the shadows, and a truth that would finally bring us back together.
After 12 silent years filled with the words, "You're not family," I never expected to see my son standing at the iron gates of my $8 million mansion on a cold November morning. The last time we spoke, he was 22, angry, and convinced that I had chosen money over him. He slammed the door of my old home, shouting that he didn't need me, didn't want me, and that I should never call him again. And for 12 years, he never did. Not on my birthdays, not on Christmas, not when I had surgery, not even when my sister died. I built my business empire alone, survived heartbreak alone, and eventually bought this mansion, the mansion he now suddenly cared enough to visit. When my security team informed me that a man claiming to be my son was at the gate, demanding entry, I felt a coldness settle in my chest. I walked to the front hall, watching him through the security monitors. His hands were in his pockets, shifting nervously, his jaw tight, his eyes darting around like he wasn't here for love, but for opportunity. I allowed the gates to open just enough for him to step inside. The moment he entered the foyer, his first words weren't, "Dad, I'm sorry," or "I've missed you." Instead, he said, "I heard your health is failing. Is it true?" I stared at him, stunned. Not even a greeting, not even a moment of softness. Where did you hear that? People talk. And look, I'm not here to fight. I need to understand where I stand regarding your estate. Estate. Not my life, not my well-being, my estate. 12 years without a single phone call, and now he wanted to know what he would inherit. I kept my voice calm. "What makes you think you stand anywhere?" He exhaled with impatience as if I was the unreasonable one. "Dad, come on. You have all this, the mansion, the companies, the accounts. I'm your son. It's only right." But the truth was harsher. For 12 years, he had made it painfully clear I was not his father, at least not one he wanted. He only remembered me now because he thought time was running out. What he didn't know was that 6 months earlier, I had indeed pretended to be gravely ill, not because I wanted pity, but because I needed to know who truly cared about me. And the only people who showed up were friends, old employees, and neighbors. My son was nowhere. Until today. I watched him scan the room as if trying to estimate his value. He wasn't here for me. He was here for the mansion, for the money, for the life he believed he deserved without earning. And that's when I made the decision. I pressed the small, discreet button on my watch. Within seconds, 2 of my security officers appeared behind him. He turned, startled. What's going on?" "You're trespassing, and you're not welcome here." His face twisted with disbelief. "You kicking me out? Your own son?" 12 years ago, I reminded him. "You told me I was not your family. Today you showed me you still believe that. Because you didn't come here for me, you came for what you could take from me." His voice cracked with anger. "This is insane. I have a right to be here." "You forfeited that right," I nodded at the guards. "Escort him out." The guards stepped forward. My son took one last desperate look at me. But I did not move. I did not speak. I simply watched, silently, as he was guided back through the same gates he had entered. And as they closed behind him, for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected, not sadness, but clarity. Blood may connect people, but loyalty defines who family truly is. I turned back into the mansion, the echo of the closing gate following me like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence. I didn't know if he would ever come back with a genuine heart, but this time, I wasn't the one who needed to fix anything. The door was open for love, but closed forever for greed.
After the gates closed behind him, the house fell silent again. The kind of silence that presses against the walls and sinks into the floor, The kind that makes a man realize just how big a mansion can feel when there's no real family inside it. I walked slowly back toward the study, the room where I kept the things that truly mattered. Photos, journals, letters, pieces of a life I had built without him. My hands trembled a little, not from age, but from the confrontation, from the sudden surge of memories I had tried to bury for a decade. I sank into the leather chair behind my desk and stared at the security screens showing the empty driveway. My son stood outside the gate for a moment, pacing, furious, gesturing wildly as if yelling at someone, maybe me, maybe the universe. And then he stormed away. But even after he disappeared down the road, something inside me stayed unsettled. For 12 years he ignored me, abandoned me, blamed me for problems I never caused. But a part of me, foolish, fragile, very human, had hoped he would return someday, with remorse, with growth, with a softened heart. Instead, he returned only when he thought my wealth was slipping through my fingers. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Margaret, my estate attorney. I picked up. "I heard he showed up," she said before I could greet her. "Security called me." "He wants access," I said bitterly. "Not to me, to the money." She sighed softly, the way someone sighs after hearing something they already expected. "Do you want to make changes to the will?" I looked around at the room, the walls lined with achievements my son had never asked about, the shelves holding memories my son never cared to share, the quiet reminders that family is not guaranteed, but earned. "Not yet," I said. "Let's wait and see what he does next." And deep down, I knew he would do something next. He wasn't the kind to take humiliation quietly. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, staining the sky orange and gold, I stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. The mansion's lights flickered on across the sprawling property, illuminating the gardens, the fountain, the long stone driveway. A place meant for warmth, laughter, connection, yet it had only ever felt like a fortress. I heard footsteps approaching behind me. It was Amelia, my house manager, someone who had stayed loyal to me for 17 years. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "I saw what happened." "I'm fine," though my voice betrayed a hint of exhaustion. "Just old wounds reopening." She nodded. "He didn't come for you. Anyone could see that." "I know," I whispered, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." She placed a comforting hand on my arm. "You have people who care about you, maybe not by blood, but by choice." Her words hit me harder than she realized because they were true. Amelia had been by my side longer than my own son had. My business partners had stood with me through storms my son never cared about. Even the people in my community had become more like family than the boy who had my last name. Still, the ache remained. Later that night, as I sat with a glass of whiskey in hand, the mansion's security alarm chimed softly, a motion alert from the gate. My chest tightened. I checked the cameras. My son was back. But this time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, mid-30s, dressed in business attire, holding a tablet and a stack of papers. They were arguing quietly, her expression stern, his anxious and defensive. I tapped the intercom. "Why are you here again?" My son looked directly into the camera, trying to appear composed. "Dad, we need to talk." "We said everything earlier," I replied coldly. The woman stepped forward and spoke clearly. "Sir, I'm his attorney." Of course. My son couldn't apologize, couldn't reflect, couldn't even face me alone. He brought legal backup. "We'd like to discuss your estate planning.
Specifically, your son's rightful claim as your only heir. I felt a slow, simmering anger rise inside me, not the explosive kind, but the quiet, dangerous kind that comes from deep betrayal. "No," I said, "not tonight, not ever like this." "Sir," the attorney persisted, "you are advanced in age, and given recent rumors about your health, rumors your client invented," I snapped. My son stepped closer, frustrated. "Dad, stop being dramatic. This is simple. You have the money. I'm your blood. It should come to me. We can make this easy or complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated softly. "Is that a threat?" He hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough to show me everything. I pressed the security button again. The guards appeared instantly, moving toward the gate. My son's attorney looked startled. "Sir, this is unnecessary." "Leave," I said, "and if either of you set foot on this property again without my invitation, you'll deal with more than security." My son's face twisted with desperation. "You can't do this! I need this money! I deserve it!" "Why?" I asked. "What have you done to earn it?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The guards escorted them both away. As they walked off, he turned back and shouted, "You'll regret this!" But I didn't feel fear. I felt finality. I went back inside the mansion, closed the heavy oak doors behind me, and leaned against them, breathing slowly. This time, I didn't feel conflicted. I felt protected, determined, and for the first time, I wondered if my son had returned not because he wanted inheritance, but because he was in trouble. Serious trouble. Debt, lawsuits, scandals, something he hoped my money could erase. And if that was true, then today was only the beginning.
For the next 2 days, the mansion stayed quiet, but my mind didn't. I couldn't shake the image of my son returning with an attorney, desperate, cornered, willing to twist blood ties into leverage. Something was wrong in his world, terribly wrong, and he believed my fortune was his escape hatch. On the third morning, while I was having coffee in the conservatory, Amelia rushed in with a worried look. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. It was a news article, recent, bold, unavoidable. My son's name was plastered across the top, next to accusations of fraud, unpaid debts, and the collapsed business venture that had reportedly burned through millions. My stomach tightened. So that was it. That was why he showed up. He didn't come because he cared whether I lived or died. He came because he was drowning. I closed the article and stared out at the garden, the light filtering through the glass, the soft rustle of leaves whispering a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had abandoned himself. Amelia spoke quietly. "He's in deep trouble, and people like him, when they're desperate, they don't stop." I nodded slowly. "I know." That afternoon, security alerted me again. A black SUV was idling near the far end of the property, just beyond the outer fence. It wasn't my son's vehicle. It wasn't anyone I recognized. They stayed for 20 minutes, then drove off. Then, later that night, a different car parked in the same spot, lights off. They stayed longer, watching, waiting. A chill crept up my spine. I called my head of security. "Double the patrol and install cameras along the back perimeter. Something's coming." He didn't argue. He could feel it too. The next day, I got a call from Margaret, my attorney. Her voice was tense. "He filed a petition," she said. "He's trying to contest your mental capacity and gain temporary control of your estate." My grip on the phone tightened. "On what grounds?" "He claims you're ill, unstable, and unfit to manage your financial affairs." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I haven't spoken to him in 12 years, and now he thinks he knows my health better than my own doctors. Margaret sighed. "He's desperate, and desperation makes people reckless." That night, I didn't sleep. Every light in the mansion felt dimmer. Every shadow felt longer. I walked through the halls, past portraits, past relics of a life I had fought hard to build, and wondered how the world had twisted so dramatically that my own flesh and blood saw me as an obstacle rather than a father. Around midnight, while checking the property cameras, I saw movement near the garden. Two figures in hoodies walking along the fence line, flashlights flickering on and off. Not thieves, too careful. Not teenagers, too purposeful. I zoomed in. They were scouting, planning. One of them lifted a phone and began recording the property. My jaw tightened. "So this is how far he'll go," I whispered. I alerted security, and the guards moved in fast, but the figures ran off before they could be caught. The next morning, the SUV returned, this time in broad daylight. My son stepped out. Alone. No lawyer, no backup. Just him, looking hollow, pale, frantic. He didn't go to the gate. Instead, he stood on the roadside, staring at the mansion from a distance, rubbing his hands together as if rehearsing something. For a brief moment, I saw the child he used to be, uncertain, scared, lost. And then the moment vanished as he took out his phone again and began filming, turning the camera toward the mansion like evidence in a case. I walked to the balcony and leaned on the railing. He saw me instantly. His face hardened. He shouted from below, "This isn't over! You should have helped me!" His voice cracked, not with remorse, but with rage. "You'll see what happens when I'm pushed too far." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Security approached him, but he backed away before they could reach him, yelling one last thing. "I'm your son! I deserve everything you have!" Then he climbed into the SUV and sped off, gravel kicking up behind him, like the tail of a comet. I stayed on the balcony long after he disappeared, the wind cold against my skin. Amelia stepped beside me quietly. "Sir, you're not safe anymore." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the empty road. "I know." And deep inside, I realized something else. My son wasn't finished. Not even close.
The following days unfolded with a tension so thick it felt like a storm building just beyond the horizon, a pressure in the air that warned me something bigger was approaching. I found myself checking the security cameras more often, listening for unfamiliar footsteps, studying every car that slowed near the long private road leading to the mansion. My son's anger, his threats, his desperation, they were no longer just emotional outbursts. They were signals, warnings, and trouble was getting closer. On the fourth morning, Margaret arrived in person, carrying a thick folder. She didn't bother with formalities. She walked straight to my study and shut the door behind us. "It's worse than I thought," she said, dropping the folder onto my desk. "Your son owes money to people you don't want to owe money to." She showed me documents, loans from private investors, interest rates that bordered on criminal, debt collectors with reputations that made seasoned attorneys nervous. "They're circling him," she continued, "and he's panicking. If he can convince a judge that you're incompetent, he could get emergency access to your assets. He's trying to use your wealth as his shield." I leaned back, absorbing each word like a weight being added to my chest. "He thinks he's entitled to everything," I murmured. "Not because he loves me, but because he needs to save himself." Margaret nodded, "And men in debt will do anything to survive." Her words echoed through me long after she left. That evening, the mansion staff noticed a drone hovering above the property, silent, small, scanning every inch of the grounds. When the guards tried to intercept it, the drone shot up and disappeared into the tree line. The next morning, another drone appeared, then another, and another. I knew exactly who was responsible. My son wasn't just desperate anymore. He was gathering evidence, manufacturing a narrative, preparing for war. That night, I gathered the entire staff in the dining hall. Emilia, the guards, the groundskeepers, the housekeepers, every loyal person who had stood by me for years. Things may get difficult, I told them, but we will not be intimidated. We will not be bullied, not by my son or by anyone he owes money to. Emilia placed her heart over her chest. We're with you, sir. You're not alone. Her words steadied me, reminding me that even if my own blood betrayed me, I had chosen family, people who stayed. Later that night, as I walked through the dim hall toward my bedroom, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A man's voice, low and cold, filled the line. We hear your son came to you. He owes us a lot, and we expect our money back. My breath froze. I don't involve myself in his debts. That's between you and him. The man chuckled, a sound without warmth. Parents usually help their children. You seem stubborn. I'm not paying, I said firmly. Understand that. The man's voice hardened. Then understand this. You're making a dangerous decision. The call ended. I stood there in the dark hallway, phone still pressed to my ear, the weight of the threat hanging like a cold mist around me. Hours later, just past midnight, a loud thud echoed across the property, something hitting the outer gate. The security alarms blared. I rushed to the camera room. 2 masked men were at the gate, shaking it, testing it, looking for weak spots. My guards responded quickly, weapons drawn, lights flooding the entrance. The men fled. But they didn't leave empty-handed. They left a message, spray-painted across the gate in bold red letters. Pay what's owed. I stared at the words for a long time, feeling something inside me tighten, shift, harden. My son's problems were no longer just his problems. He had dragged them straight to my doorstep. And now these men believed my wealth, my work, my legacy was their solution. At dawn, Margaret approached me on the balcony with a worried expression. Sir, she whispered, this won't stop, not unless you take action. I know, I said quietly. I've been too patient, too hopeful. I looked out at the sprawling estate, the place I had built to be a sanctuary, now becoming a battleground. It's time, I said, to protect what's mine and to protect the people who've been loyal to me. Emilia swallowed nervously. What are you going to do? I turned to her slowly, the first flicker of resolve sharpening in my voice. I'm going to take back control, and the first step is confronting my son face to face on my terms. But even as I said it, I sensed something shifting in the air, something darker, heavier, because before I could confront him, he would come back one more time, and this time he wouldn't come asking, he would come demanding.
The next morning began with an unease so sharp it felt like a warning from the walls themselves, as if the mansion had grown eyes and knew something was coming before I did. The staff moved quietly, speaking in hushed tones, glancing toward the windows, as though expecting shadows to move on their own. Even the air felt heavier, as though danger had slipped under the doors during the night and settled into the hallways. Around noon, my head of security, Nolan, knocked on my study door. His jaw was tight. Sir, we need to talk, privately. I locked the door behind him. He slid a flash drive onto my desk. This was taken from the drone we intercepted this morning, the one that crashed near the greenhouse. I plugged it into my computer. The footage played, grainy but clear enough. A man, wearing a black jacket and gloves, was loading gear into a trunk. My son stood beside him, pacing nervously, arguing, gesturing wildly. The man shoved a duffel bag into his chest. My son hesitated. Then he took it. I zoomed in.
The bag contained bolt cutters, gloves, something metallic wrapped in cloth, and a map. My property map. Nolan spoke quietly. He wasn't just spying on you. He was helping them plan something. I stared at the screen, silent. My son wasn't only desperate. He was cooperating with the very men threatening my life. Whether willingly or out of fear didn't matter anymore. He was involved, dangerously involved. Later that evening, as sunlight stretched long across the marble floors, I received another call. This time not from unknown numbers, but from the county sheriff himself. "Mr. Archer," he said, "we've been informed someone might attempt to force access to your estate in the next 72 hours. You need to be prepared. These men have priors, armed burglary, extortion, intimidation." My grip tightened on the phone. "Sheriff, that someone is my son." There was a long pause. "Family doesn't excuse crime," he said quietly. "Be careful." After the call, I stood on the mansion balcony, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn, feeling the tension coil like a spring inside my chest. Amelia joined me moments later, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's sinking, sir, and drowning men grab anything. They don't care who they pull under." I closed my eyes. I used to be a good boy. I don't know where that version of him went. "Maybe he left the moment he decided money was more valuable than you," she replied softly. Before I could answer, Nolan rushed onto the balcony. "We have activity at the North Ridge," he said. "Thermal cameras picked up movement. 3 heat signatures." My heart dropped. It was barely past dusk. They weren't waiting for midnight. I followed Nolan to the control room. On the monitors, 3 figures moved along the tree line, slow, coordinated, purposeful. Then a 4th figure appeared, my son. He wasn't trying to sneak in. He was directing them. One man pointed toward the garden gate, another pointed toward the service entrance. My son pointed toward the mansion itself. I felt something inside me fracture, not physically, not emotionally, but morally. There was no doubt left, no confusion, no lingering hope. He wasn't being manipulated. He wasn't being forced. He was choosing this, choosing to invade my home, choosing to threaten me, choosing to side with criminals instead of with his father. Nolan turned to me. "Sir, what do you want us to do?" My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Protect the property. No one gets inside. Not him, not them." Nolan nodded, signaling the guards. The security team moved like a small army, locking down entrances, activating perimeter floodlights, positioning themselves strategically. The property lit up like daylight and the 4 figures froze. My son spun around, startled, covering his face with his arm. The men behind him reached for their bags. Then suddenly, sirens. Sheriff's deputies arrived sooner than expected, flooding the road, speeding toward the ridge. My son panicked. The other men ran in different directions. One dropped the duffel bag. The deputies chased after them. My son stumbled, falling to his knees, shouting something I couldn't hear. I leaned closer to the monitor. He wasn't shouting for help. He was shouting at the men, blaming them, pointing at them, distancing himself immediately. Even in disaster, he protected only himself. Deputies grabbed him, cuffing him as he tried to argue, tried to gesture toward the mansion like he had a right to be here, like he was the victim. I exhaled slowly, my hands gripping the desk, my heart heavy in a way I couldn't describe. Nolan looked at me carefully. "Do you want to speak with him?" I stared at the screen, my son in handcuffs, angry, terrified, not because he'd betrayed me, but because he'd been caught. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said quietly. "He hasn't hit the bottom of this fall. Not even close." And deep inside, I knew something else. His arrest would only be the beginning of a larger storm. Because men like the ones he owed didn't forget, didn't forgive, and didn't disappear. And they would come back. For him, for money, maybe even for me.
Mark's voice trembled as he finally turned back toward me, his hands shaking slightly as he pulled the old folder closer to his chest, almost as if he feared someone might try to snatch it away again. "Dad, this file, you kept all of this? Even after everything? Even after I—" His voice cracked, the words dying in his throat as he stared at the documents, the photographs, and the years of sacrifice laid bare in front of him. For a moment, the world felt painfully still, the cold night air wrapping around us, the echo of passing cars fading into a distant hum, while the weight of unspoken regret pressed heavily between us. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because if I opened my mouth right then, I wasn't sure whether my voice would come out steady or completely shatter. Mark swallowed hard and looked away, blinking rapidly, his jaw tightening as though he was trying to hold himself together. "I didn't know," he whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "I didn't know how much you were still doing for me." His shoulders collapsed inward, a defeated posture I hadn't seen on him since he was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "I thought you'd given up on me, that I didn't matter to you anymore." His words stung, not because they were true, but because it showed just how far apart we had drifted, how many years of silence had carved a canyon between us that neither of us knew how to cross. I stepped closer, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes, and placed a hand on his shoulder. He tensed for a moment, then slowly, almost reluctantly, let out a long breath and allowed himself to lean into the touch, as if he had been holding up the weight of his entire life alone for far too long. "Mark," I finally said, my voice low but steady, "you've always mattered. Even when you thought I wasn't watching, even when you thought I didn't care, I never stopped being your father." His eyes glistened, but he quickly looked down, pretending to brush dust off the file just so he wouldn't have to meet my gaze. Then, before either of us could say more, my phone buzzed sharply in my pocket. An unfamiliar number. No caller ID. I frowned and answered, only to hear a voice I hadn't expected, a voice that instantly changed the air around us. "Judge Harrison?" the man said firmly, the faint sound of radios crackling behind him. "This is Deputy Collins. You need to know something right now. Your son's name just came up in our ongoing investigation, and you both may be in danger." Mark's head snapped up, panic flickering in his eyes as he mouthed, "What's happening?" I didn't know, but the deputy's next words sent a cold chill crawling down my spine, darker than anything that had happened tonight. "Sir, someone has been tracking you since morning." And just like that, the night wasn't quiet anymore. The story wasn't simple anymore. And our past wasn't the only thing standing in front of us. Something else was coming. Something bigger. Something that had just found us.
The moment Deputy Collins uttered those words, a cold heaviness settled over the night, the kind that makes the air feel thick and impossible to breathe. Mark stiffened beside me, clutching the file as if it were the only stable thing left in his world. "Tracked?" he whispered, confusion and fear mixing in his voice. "Dad, what does he mean, tracked?" I didn't know yet, but the deputy wasn't calling me without reason. "Listen to me carefully," he said over the phone, his tone firm and urgent. "We found a vehicle circling your neighborhood multiple times today. Same model seen near the courthouse. Same model spotted near your son's workplace last week. Whoever it is, they've been keeping tabs on both of you." My heart thudded heavily against my ribs. Years of sitting on the bench as a judge had earned me many enemies. People who had sworn revenge. People who had vowed to come after me. I thought those threats had faded with time, but apparently time only made shadows grow longer. Mark grabbed my arm. "Dad, is this because of me? Is this something I did?" I shook my head quickly. "No, this is because of me, my past, my cases." But even as I said it, A terrible possibility gnawed at me. That maybe the distance between us, the silence, the misunderstandings, had kept Mark from telling me things he had been facing too. Before I could ask, Collins continued, "Sir, I need you both to stay exactly where you are. A unit is already en route to your location. Do not move. Do not approach anyone." The line clicked off. Mark and I exchanged a look. Fear, confusion, and something else. Unity. For the first time in years, we weren't standing on opposite sides of anything. We were in this together. Minutes passed like hours, until the distant glow of blue and red lights finally appeared at the end of the old gravel road. A patrol SUV rolled up beside us, and Deputy Collins stepped out, tall, disciplined, eyes scanning our surroundings like a hawk. "Judge Harrison," he said, nodding respectfully, then turned to Mark. "Mr. Harrison, we need to talk." He motioned for us to sit inside the patrol vehicle. Once the door shut, Collins lowered his voice. "We ran a check on the vehicle following you. It's registered under a man named Victor Rains." The name hit me like a blow. Victor Rains, one of the most dangerous defendants I'd ever sentenced. A man who swore in open court that he would make me pay. But he was locked away. I said sharply, "He's still in prison." Collins nodded. "Yes, but 2 weeks ago his brother was released." That explained everything. A chill ran through Mark. "So he came after Dad?" Collins hesitated before answering. "Not just your father. We believe he planned to get to the judge through you." I felt Mark freeze beside me, his breath catching as the realization washed over him. All the buried tension between us, all the years of distance, all the misunderstandings, none of it mattered now. We were father and son again. Collins continued, "But there's good news. We located the suspect before he could reach either of you. He's in custody now." Relief hit me so hard my shoulders slumped, tension spilling out of me like air from a punctured tire. Mark rubbed both hands over his face, letting out a shaking breath. "So, it's over." Collins nodded. "You're safe now." Safe, a word that suddenly felt heavier than it ever had. When the officers finally drove away and left us standing alone on the gravel road, the world felt different. Quieter, calmer, clearer. Mark stepped closer to me, the moon casting a soft silver outline along his shoulders. "Dad," he said quietly, "I know we've had our share of messes. I know I pushed you away. I know you kept trying and I kept shutting you out. But tonight, seeing everything you kept from me, hearing everything you said, I don't want us to go back to being strangers." My throat tightened. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. "Neither do I whispered. He held up the old file, the evidence of years of love, sacrifice, and fatherhood. "Can we start over?" I nodded slowly, a warmth blooming in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "We already have, son." Mark's eyes glistened. He exhaled long and shaky, then laughed softly. "Come on, Dad. Let's go home. Together this time." I looked at him, my son, my once lost, now found son, and felt the weight of all those lonely nights finally lift. "Together," I said, and for the first time in a long, long while, we meant it. The gravel crunched beneath our feet as we walked side by side towards my truck. The night finally peaceful, the danger finally over, and the past finally, mercifully, behind us. But the future, that was wide open, waiting for both of us.